super privileged to have Stani here today to talk about aspirations and the vision for cross-chain Go. I don't think Stani needs any introduction. I assume everyone here knows who Stani is. But yeah, super excited to dive into Go, vision for cross-chain Go, and also how that might leverage CCIP. So yeah, I suppose Emilio, who presented earlier, mentioned that Aave has been like the oldest user of Chainlink price feeds from day one. So super excited to be working closely with them and then also helping them realize their cross-chain aspirations as well. So maybe to kick things off, we can jump right in. And it would be great to hear a little bit about the motivation behind creating Go. Yeah, so over to you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and super glad to be here and seeing all this audience. And there was like a really exciting talks and makes me feel that we're kind of in a time period where it's really good to be in Web3 and especially in DeFi. A lot of things has been built on the infrastructure side, but there's enormous amount of things that we all are still here building, and we're still pretty much in a very small user base. If you look at the whole kind of like a financial infrastructure where DeFi can be as well, and obviously all the other non-financial use cases. Go is from the use case perspective and ideation. So effectively, I mean, Aave protocol's background is a lending protocol. So effectively, it's a way to supply cryptographic assets and earn yield on your cryptographic portfolio. And you can unlock the capital by borrowing other types of assets. So usually you might supply ETH or grab Bitcoin and borrow stablecoins. During the past years, for example, the protocol itself has grown quite significantly. So whenever we've been building a new iteration of Aave, for example, in the version 2, we expected to have maybe couple of hundred million worth of value locked. Well, what happened is that DeFi grew significantly, and there was few billions worth of value in the protocol, and we were thinking that, well, we actually need to build something a bit more better, more secure, and also more granularly better risk management. So we built the version 3 of the Aave protocol, which is more flexible and kind of like at the state-of-the-art protocol at this point. And the way we think about products in general at Aave is in the company itself, is that we always think about the actual, who is the Aave user, and what is the average user on Aave, and what they want, and what kind of need we need to fulfill. So for example, that we know there's a lot of innovation happening in DeFi right now. Aave has quite enormous success, and it's amazing everyone who is using the protocol and are enjoying those yields and whatnot. But we see a lot of innovation happening now, for example, in different kinds of edge use cases, for example, building permissionless lending pools as well, silent borrowing, and a lot of these fascinating features. When we think about products, we try to always build on the main use case. So what is the main user that is using Aave? What are we trying to solve? And how do we actually solve it better, faster, and economically more cheaper as well? And something we realized that users come to the Aave protocol, and when they might want to borrow, they can't get the exact rate that they really want to. So maybe the liquidity is more expensive for them, or there might not be liquidity necessarily, because the way the protocol works is that the more you draw liquidity, the interest rate algorithmically will increase. And what it means is that as a base user who just wants a simple use case of drawing liquidity and borrowing, you might not have those stablecoins there necessarily, or they're overpriced for you. And that's where we're thinking about Go, is that, what if we could actually mint directly a stablecoin into the Aave market, and at the same time enable users to earn on their collateral. And at that time when we were thinking about it, it was quite appealing use case, because you usually have a collateral composition of multiple assets when you're borrowing. And you really need a better UX than existed. So for example, if you go and borrow Go today, you can do it with your whole portfolio of assets that are eligible in one account, for example. And that's how we basically realized that if we have this DAO governed approach to providing liquidity into the protocol, that gives better user experience and a better product for the user. So in simplicity, it's just making the protocol as a product better. And that's how the Go was born. And then there's like a lot of interesting technicalities that came into it. So as you saw, for example, from Emilia's presentation with the cross-chain Go and CCIP, there's so-called facilitators. So in the future, the next facilitators can be, for example, minting Go against other markets that are not Aave protocol, RWAs, and other interest use cases, what there might be actually.
Awesome, thanks. So I think you've touched on like a couple of competitive advantages there, but obviously there exist several different stablecoin models in the market. So I suppose it would be great if you could elaborate on some of the other competitive advantages that Go as a stablecoin model has versus other existing stablecoin models in the market.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because when we approach stablecoins and we're building the actual infrastructure, so the clear thing is that you can earn on your collateral. So effectively, you can reduce your borrowing cost on the Go stablecoin itself. Factually, majority of the users are borrowing quite on a low rate that you will be doing it on the market at the moment with other stablecoins. But our approach is quite different, and the perspective we're coming towards stablecoins is different as well. So as a lending protocol, what actually is the biggest benefit is that there is the collateralization. So effectively what Aave is all about is the collateralization and ability to earn. And there are other stablecoins, for example, they might start from a perspective where they already have a decentralized exchange or AMM, which they're using to bootstrap the liquidity. We wanted to go out as organically as possible without any kind of native liquidity incentives and basically think about how we could make a better experience for the user that is using the existing protocol by borrowing other stablecoins. And effectively what the Aave DAO went for is basically to mint Go in a lower cost than the other stablecoins in the market. So that's the kind of like a main thing there. And obviously the facilitators on the infrastructure side, and also there's a second facilitator actually that is Flash minting Go. So anyone who is integrating or building in DeFi, you can actually use the Flash minter facilitator as well for Go. But the perspective is quite different, and it's actually fascinating to look at now where you have these other DeFi protocols building stablecoins and their approaches as well. And obviously the collateralization is something that is a next step for Go. And it's still very early. So Go is today, I believe we're roughly have 35 million worth of Go minted, pretty much organically, which is quite cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some really interesting innovations with the Go stablecoin design. So could you potentially also elaborate on how variable interest rates affect the peg stability of Go? It's potentially also very interesting, especially as you mentioned in early days as people are starting to adopt Go more and more so like at an accelerated rate now.
Yeah, that's interesting. So one of the things that the Aave users have been talking about quite a lot is that having the stability on interest rates and variable interest rates are quite interesting in the sense that you kind of can, assume some sort of interest rate level if you look at the past performance of the variable rate. And we've done actually other types of interest rate models. We tried basically kind of like a anchored stable rate where you have a rate that you can lock yourself in based on the variable rate, but calculated in a way that it guarantees additional revenue to the Aave protocol and guarantees you that stable rate until it gets rebalanced at some point in the future in time. But what we notice is that, being able to provide a rate that is more predictable, and predictability is also something that the users are excited about having as a feature. But what I think about, there's one important thing to think about the stablecoin rates as well, because they're not really obviously fixed rates, and creating fixed rate is kind of like another type of mission that some of the folks are trying to solve in decentralized finance. But what we're trying to do with the Go is actually bring more predictability in the rates. And once you have a certain type of a liquidity profile and also a peg, what happens then is that you can set a interest rate that is basically at a certain level that doesn't change that often. And that brings really interesting utility for the Aave protocol users that are using mostly variable rates.
Mm-hmm. And perhaps you discussed this briefly at the start, and obviously Emilio covered this earlier, but I think we're also really interested to understand a bit more about the vision of how CCIP helps unlock Go utility cross-chain as well, and why that's a critical kind of infrastructure block to enable that vision.
Yeah, and it's kind of fair to say now that there's going to be like a multi-chain future. At least it already is in some extent. You have these different communities, and users are looking into L2s where the transaction costs are lower. You can build amazing products like GMX, for example, where you can have more frequent pricing and trading, and unlocks just like amazing new DeFi use cases and products as well. And besides the lower transaction cost and having Go in these new communities, the kind of bigger vision is also how we can grow the gross domestic product of on-chain ecosystem. So how we actually enable people to use decentralized finance in more day-to-day, and that's where we think that having CCIP and being able to create the value in a secured network, but then reflect the value in a L2 where the costs are lower, and actually go into payment use cases is something that we envision. And that's going to be a quite long game as well. And I think that's going to be more of a game where it's not really solved in the infrastructure level. I do think that you can do pretty decent. That you can actually have quite low payment transaction costs already, but you need to build those experiences on a front end level, and that's something I've been talking about quite a lot. That we built this amazing DeFi infrastructure, like a DeFi backend, and now there's like a lot of opportunities to build a DeFi front end. The experiences that actually then will be more consumer facing and could be actually scaled to bigger user bases. But to get there, we have to build in a way where not just having good UX, but also product design that is end to end, something that consumers are able to use as well, and that will bring a lot of business on chain. And I always think about the example of early internet, where the businesses brought a lot of the transactioning online, because internet obviously was an amazing way to seek for information, especially for me. So I could find information outside of school, parents, your friends, library, and you can access all kinds of information globally. But when you actually started to have commerce on chain, not on chain yet, but on the internet, what was exciting is that you could actually buy various kind of goods or books or services online. And you have to figure a way of settling transactions. And that's how PayPal was born. That's how a lot of the Stripe as well, a lot of the actually online infrastructure for payments and financial services were born as well. And I think the same path should follow, and probably will follow, for on-chain gross domestic product, because the more we can actually do business on-chain, the more you have to use this on-chain settlement instruments as well. And that's where kind of like the longer vision of Go will be. So now it's very much about how we get Go into all these networks and how do we use CCIP, and Emilio did a wonderful demonstration of how the technical architecture will work. But once we finish with the technical part, the next part is that how we actually make people to use this technology on a day-to-day basis, and that's going to be super, super exciting.
So I know you mentioned before that we've basically built a lot of the back-end infrastructure. And although UX is only one component that's kind of a point of friction at the moment for people like coming on chain and making these assets more productive, I think part of the UX friction is also that I think bridging is not very intuitive as well for new users. So I'm interested, obviously Aave also launched portals. I think a lot of people in the room may be familiar with portals, but would love for you to elaborate on how portals, what portals means for cross-chain Go as well.
Yeah, I think this was more in Emilia's presentation, but what's cool about portals is that the idea is that you can settle cross-chain transactions faster by basically giving credit to eligible agents, which can be the Aave DAO itself, so kind of taking self-risk there, or maybe third parties like bridges. And the idea there is that you can mint temporarily unbacked, for example, assets like Go and back it later in time. And this allows you to, for example, supply liquidity in one network and borrow, for example, in another. So it's part of thinking, and this is version 3 that we were already building almost 2 years ago, and thinking how people will actually do cross-chain transactions and how we will interact across all these networks that are being built. It's a feature that we haven't put a lot of mind into over the past couple of years, but it's becoming recently more important as more liquidity is moving to L2s. And we're starting to see that the liquidity also moves between these L2s. So based on arbitrage or just users using multiple networks. I think if we can do a quick poll, how many of you are using more than 2 networks now? Oh, yeah, almost pretty much everyone. So there is kind of a lot of demand for that kind of movements between networks, and as we know, people don't want to wait.
Mm-hmm. This is a really impressive innovation from Aave, because this is basically a product in itself, right? That people will now realize the value of, basically being able to provide those liquidity markets at either end to make cross-chain interactions more efficient, right? So just, I suppose, to go full circle with this conversation, how do you think, how important is interoperability in as DeFi matures, as we see the proliferation of more L2s and more alt L1s, how important is cross-chain interoperability and the reliability of these solutions?
I think from the governance perspective, what's very interesting is that the Aave protocols are governed by the Aave DAO and cross-chain. So pretty much before the whole bridging, before we saw a lot of bridges being built, we built a governance module that messages between networks and executes transactions. And basically now, in the current moment, all of these deployments across multiple networks of the Aave protocol are governed by the DAO. So just even the governance piece is relying on these cross-chain communications, which is really important just for the governance perspective. And then when you think about the nature of the Aave protocol, it's a protocol where you have different functions like collateralization. Maybe you have your liquidity. You might have some of your liquidity in one network and another. So you need this kind of a messaging across. But down the line, if you think about it, and if you want to build a really efficient products and protocols that the users like, you have to have data integrity. And that's why I'm a little bit skeptical of the idea of creating a lot of these permissionless pools with like bring your own Oracle solutions. And the reason for that is that the normal users, they don't really want to go through the hassle. They want a system that has integrity. And the idea of the blockchain is to bring that integrity, bring the governance as well, and also bring data integrity. And that's why I think where the Chainlink role has been played in the Aave ecosystem, and why we've been excited about this for years. And before Chainlink, we built our own Oracle solution, and the biggest hassle for that was the actual management of the Oracle and providing that infrastructure. And that's where like things get really complicated. And I do believe that if you want to build like an efficient system and also reliable system, that's where Oracle like Chainlink comes into play.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really interesting because ultimately, I think end users maybe don't necessarily want this optionality. Like these are the sorts of things where now, as you alluded to earlier, when people are using like e-commerce platforms online, there's a lot of like back-end decisions that as a retail user, I don't want to have to make. Like I'd much rather it be abstracted away from me.
And also those are the decisions that people usually don't see, like the community members. So when you think about oracles and a lot of these communities, they're choosing their oracles. They don't really know what goes into that DevOps work, the node infrastructure and everything related to that. So it's a kind of like a hard job because you kind of like have to blindly choose a provider, and DeFi is all about transparency. So it's a kind of like a difficult task, and I think reliability is the interesting part. And speaking of the e-commerce, what's interesting is that the use cases that are non-financial, that what kind of data you can actually pull in. And I think that at some point, we have to do a lot of decisions, product decisions on what kind of data can exist on chain and what we really can have it there. And maybe we have to use data availability layers, and how do you pull that data into on chain when it's actually needed. And that's where I'm also excited about the Oracle component when it comes to, for example, Web3 social. And we've, at the Aave company, we built the Lens protocol, and Lens is effectively a set of smart contracts that gives you social networking primitives. For example, you can create a profile or a handle, and then you can follow other profiles and create content. So basic social networking primitives. And what's interesting here is that as these protocols are starting to scale, you have to think about like what kind of data you can have on chain. Whether you have to put your followers on a data availability layer and bring them in through an Oracle on chain when you need to actually execute. So I think even more exciting decisions is going to happen, and product decisions on the non-financial use cases as well, such as social, for example.
Mm-hmm. And similar to what you were describing for Aave before, when you guys made the decision to like outsource price discovery to Chainlink, for example, because of the complexity and overhead of maintaining that. Similarly, for Lens, I suppose solutions like Chainlink functions, like a generalizable oracle, which means that consumers of this can decide what data they want to bring on chain. Using a decentralized solution for that also abstracts away like the additional DevOps and overhead for Aave as well. So it's really interesting, as you mentioned, going beyond financial use cases, how oracles and as Aave broadens its suite, like to Lens v2 and stuff, like how other solutions basically help support.
Yeah, and that's actually interesting because with Lens v2 we have this feature called Smart Posts. We were marketing them previously as open actions, but effectively what it means is that as Lens is on-chain social, in most of the part there's the data availability aspect as well. But you can effectively create a post and you have these smart contract based actions. So you can amplify the content, you get comments, and you can collect content as NFTs as well. But with smart posts, you can add any type of an action into a Lens post. And what it basically means is that you can create an action that happens in another network. And by using, for example, CCIP, you can create an action that happens in another network, but you initiate it from the source network. And the idea there is just to purely bring more composability and flexibility to what people are building. So we're all spending a lot of time, well, not all, but I'm pretty sure most of you, on social, and that's where the attention goes. So basically, you could do smart contract-based actions directly on your Web3 social feed, and these actions can be anything that you are excited about. So that can be a contribution to a Gitcoin grant. It can be as simple as buying an NFT that is secured by Ethereum, or you can go long on it on GMX, on Arbitrum. Like there's a bunch of things you can do which are interesting, and that's why I think that the Oracle component is somewhere where it really connects the whole composability between all the networks, but also protocols. And we're trying to build things and make product decisions at our company in a way where we take less opinion and try to build as unopinionated infrastructure as possible to create these use cases and support whatever creativity you might have.
I think we're very aligned in this view. Like Chainlink runs multiple hackathons every year, and the solution that we saw that was most popular with developers when they were participating in these hackathons was what was previously called any API, which was basically like the beta version of functions where you can solicit any one node operator to go and retrieve data from like an arbitrary API. And what Chainlink had been very good at doing over the years was telling dApps like what data could be pulled on chain, like what price feeds we're comfortable spinning up, but actually giving developers the opportunity to dictate this, opening up this like self-serve option is great for driving like further innovation and stuff. So it's good to see, I suppose, like both very aligned with like that vision as well.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about this kind of like multi-chain vision and how far it goes, because there are people where I talk to and they are saying that there's going to be like thousands of app chains and L2s. And at the same time, you talk to people and they said that there's going to be maybe like 2-3 like main ones. So I don't know like how much of like composability end of the day is needed, but somehow whether it's like 5, 10, or like hundreds different L2s, you need to connect some way the data. And I like to think about the whole Oracle aspect in a way that it's kind of like a way of like managing data logistics on chain and between networks. And I do think that there's going to be a lot more innovation happening. So if you're building something related to oracles now and innovating on top of the CCIP, I think it's like a wonderful opportunity to build some interesting projects, and especially if you're building something that really helps in the DeFi side or on the Web3 social side. I'd really like to talk to you as well and see what you're building.
Awesome. Well, Stani, thank you so much for your time today. I think that pulls us to time. I don't know, do we have any time for Q&A? Yep, perfect. Well, I'll hand it over to any questions for Stani.
When is Lens opening up to more general sort of access?
I have this thing you can actually mint. You're gonna get so if so yeah.
This is still so Web2 though.
No, it's not. There's NFT there. That's actually quite interesting. So what that is that when you scan that, you mint a Finny NFT. So Finny is a NFT collection with this like character. So if you're active on Lens later on, what happens is that character is happy and smiling, and when it's like if you're not active, it's basically sad at that point. And I think they're using Chainlink Oracle, by the way, for that. So that's an interesting Web3 social and Chainlink kind of like primitive. But it's a good question. So we did the migration from Lens v1 to Lens v2, which was like a very heavy technical depth lift, and now our next stage is basically to think about how we're going to open the network completely for permissionless minting. But to be honest, there is a formal framework called Lens Improvement Proposals, LIPS. So anyone can actually go today and propose to open the network, and if that gets support, it can be opened up already if you want it faster than what we can do.
Thanks.
Great. So looking forward and thinking like 5 years from now, where do you see both Aave and Lens going?
Yeah, it's because there's two kind of like components, right? There's the Aave company and what we're in 5 years, and where these two protocols will be. From the company side, we built. We want to build the internet that is people-powered, that benefits all. Basically, meaning that people have more ability to contribute socially and economically. And the internet is more balanced. And companies will still have good actually use case in the decentralized world by providing services and building businesses. But the underlying infrastructure should be decentralized. So what we basically are using. So we're giving more power to the users in the exchange of the users are having more skin in the game. And when they have more skin in the game, they're more vested. They care more about what we're building and what we're doing on the web. So that's what we want to do with our team. So we're known of building really amazing engineering on the contract side. On the back-end side, and we're basically focusing a lot on improving more of the UX side and the designing side. So if there's any great UX engineers or designers, we're open to talk, and also we're hiring Solidity engineers as well. We work on very complex topics as well. On the Aave protocol side, I think at some point it becomes a public good. Less governed infrastructure, and I think the same path will happen with Lens. So eventually what will happen is that these protocols will be public good, accessible to anyone with minimal intervention from all of us and the governance. And I think that's the kind of like a end game there. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think we'll call it there. Thanks again for joining us today, Stani. And appreciate it. Can we get a round of applause, please?